Survey. Immigration target set by Ottawa. Quebecers want to have their say. But this is more than just a poll about having a say or who gets to decide. With all due respect to the initiative of the Century Lobby, a majority of Quebecers want to have a say on federal immigration thresholds before opening the doors of Canada-wide. Now that Century thing they're talking about, there's a crazy proposal to triple Canada's population to 100 million people, that's the Century part, in just a couple of decades. Why would you do that? Why would you bring 60, 70 million people here to just do it? Sure, Canada is the second largest country in the world, but most of it is uninhabitable. Those migrants they're talking about, often from tropical countries, they are not going to live in Inuvik, and even if they wanted to, they couldn't. It can't sustain it. They're going to go to Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver and other big cities. So imagine 20 million person metropolises, the majority of whom will have just arrived. What a terrible idea in terms of housing and hospitals and schools and traffic and policing and cultural fit and jobs. Everything. It's just a crazy idea. That's this Century Initiative thing. And here's the reply of Quebecers. Indeed, 73% of respondents to a recent Léger Le Journal survey believe that Quebec should be consulted regarding the federal government's immigration targets. The majority is confirmed as much among Francophones, 78%, as among non-French speakers, 58%. So Quebecers don't want some lobby group to make a decision. They want to be asked about this decision. But look at the question about raw numbers of immigration itself. The issue of federal thresholds has come back in the news since the publication of our file on Ottawa's willingness to welcome 500,000 new permanent residents annually from 2025, double the number received in 2014. However, only 22% of them want to raise the thresholds for Quebec. By adding up the people in favor of the status quo, we still get 51% of respondents opposed to a decline. Indeed, the idea of a decrease only gets the support of a minority with 41%, despite the many debates on the subject during the last election campaign. Did you see that trickery there? Did you see that trickery, though? That's editorial commentary. They're trying to fudge things. Why did they add status quo people to the same chunk as people who want to raise immigration? Why wouldn't they add it to the lower it and say 78% want the numbers the same or low? Obviously, to spin the fact that by a ratio of 2 to 1, people prefer lower immigration to higher immigration. Do you see the trick they did there? They added the, I don't knows to the, yeah, we want more. And they say, it's a majority. There's tricksters there, aren't they? There are other points about Quebecers' desire that their immigration speak French. Of course, they want that. They want to preserve their cultural heritage. I'm not sure it's possible to add 60 or 70 million people to Canada through immigration without swamping French as a language. There are only 67 million people who live in all of France total. You cannot bring in tens or 100 million people to Canada and expect French to have a future, just saying the obvious. Like I say, Peter Thiel's question, what is a truth that few people agree on with you? Well, reducing immigration is actually a demand by quite a few Canadians, including Quebecers, even if the Journal de Montréal doesn't believe so. And for good reason. In the country of 100 million people, 8 million French speakers, which is approximately what there is now, that's a rounding error now. It's not a founding nation anymore, is it? Okay, I want to show you one more poll. This one's in English. It's by Angus Reid. It's a different subject altogether. Canada's global image. Half of Canadians believe nation's international reputation is on the decline. Now, before I go further, in some ways, I don't really care what other people in the world think about Canada. This isn't high school where you want to be popular to fit in. We are who we are. We're a country. That said, if our friends and allies think less of us, it behooves us to ask why. And if our enemies like us more, we should ask why also. Why would we want dictatorships like China to praise us? Here, I'll read the preamble to the Angus Reid press release. A cache of leaked Pentagon documents recently confirmed a secret that many have suspected for years, as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reportedly admitted that Canada is unlikely to ever meet the 2% military defense spending target recommended by NATO. Amid this, a new study from the nonprofit Angus Reid Institute finds Canadians less enthusiastic about their perception of the country's international reputation than they have been in recent years. Half of Canadians, 51%, say Canada has a good or very good reputation abroad, while 1/4 say it is poor or very poor, and 1/4 say it is average. Notably, there has been a 33-point drop since 2018 in the proportion offering a positive view. That's incredible. I remember when Canadians were amongst the best loved people in the world. In fact, some Americans used to sew a little Canadian maple leaf on their backpacks when they traveled through Europe. Not sure if that's happening anymore. Not sure Canadians as citizens are disliked. I don't think we are. But our government, especially Trudeau, is giving us a bad reputation. It's sometimes shocking to see about whether it's the New York Post or the Daily Mail of London, England, or the European Parliament. A lot of people see right through Trudeau. And unlike our mainstream media, they're not afraid to say it. And I think it's shocking because we're so used to apologies from the media party. We're shocked to see things like this.
That it would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
All right, back to the Angus Reid survey. Let me read a little more. Let's start with a pretty basic question, pretty easy one here. Overall, what kind of reputation would you say Canada has internationally? That's an easy question. As you can see, the question was asked in 2016, 2018, 2020, last year, again, just this month. Until a few years ago, it was steady. In fact, it briefly went up in Trudeau's first term. Canadians, I guess, were feeling pretty good about themselves. Our belief in our world reputation actually climbed a bit from 79% to 84%. But then Trudeau's obsequious dealings with communist China took hold. His mocking insults to India, his general buffoonery started to get noticed. Blackface. And of course, his inner tyrant shone through during the pandemic. The lockdowns and the Banana Republic-style martial law invocation, that was spooky to a lot of people. Look at that, from 71% to 62%, plunging to just 51% this year, saying we have a strong international reputation. They're right. Trudeau is deluding himself. He only goes to tightly scripted, tightly controlled events where people are curated to love him. But real people see through him, both at home and abroad. Let me show you one more graph. Look at this one. All things considered, do you think Canada's reputation around the world is better or worse now than it was? And then they check different times, 10 years ago, last year, whatever. Massive, massive. That red line is the people who say it's gotten worse. That blue sliver is better. Only 7% of people think it's gotten better over the last year. That is crazy. Here's another image here. Even liberals aren't exactly thrilled with Trudeau's reputation abroad. That's amazing. Look, people are starting to see through Justin Trudeau. But not just through Trudeau, through him and his media courtiers who decide what we can and can't talk about or can and can't even think. Canadians are embarrassed by Trudeau's international antics, not impressed by them. And Trudeau's plan to triple Canada's size through mass open borders immigration is unpopular, including with other new immigrants, and especially in French Quebec. I wonder if Pierre Poilievre will ever find the courage to talk about these things. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.